kind of part of our ethos is like always do it right. And, no tricks. Like, I mean, they may work quickly, but, you want to invest in the fundamentals. And so that long-term, you can really capture and maintain your place. At the time, I remember there were a lot of tricks people were trying and stuff that were, kind of sketchy, like hiding text and stuff. And we just avoided all of that. And the sites that were doing that at the time all got penalized, with the algorithm updates, and Google would change things and then people would lose rankings. And that was one thing that we never had to worry about, right? Because we're always doing it according to like what they suggested.
Welcome to Sit Down Startup Founder Podcast, where we interview top founders on all things growth, retention, expansion. It's our goal to help you learn from the best by hearing exactly what they did so you can apply those similar approaches to your seed and Series A company. I'm your host, Adam O'Donnell, former founder in Silicon Valley VC. I currently manage VC and startup partnerships at Zendesk for Startups here in Silicon Valley. Zendesk for Startups offers 6 months free for all things Zendesk for all qualified high-growth companies. This week, I had the pleasure of interviewing Cy Scott, one of the founders of LFLY, a cannabis marketplace similar to a Yelp. They're now a publicly traded company listed on the NASDAQ. My biggest learnings: don't hack everything. As a former founder, I always wanted to find the things that I didn't need to do to be able to get there better, faster, cheaper. But as you just heard, it doesn't always work out, and they focus on doing the hard things right. My takeaway here: we got to know what corners to cut and which ones to not. Second, know when to follow your convictions. He talked about making a decision to immediately go after the new channel of the App Store. As a cannabis company, this was not easy. They went through a lot more hurdles to get their app approved by Apple, but he knew to keep fighting that battle. And I asked him why, and he said because he had an iPhone. He knew the difference between using an app and just a normal website, and this was going to be the future. So know which battles to pick and which battles to just, hey, we don't need to fight this right now. Shout out to our top partner, Startup Grind. They're the world's largest community of startups, founders, innovators, and creators. Check them out. Welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here because you founded two incredible companies, one LFLY and the other Headset, both in the cannabis space. One's a marketplace and one's like more of a data play. I want to hear, like, now that it's a publicly traded company, would love to kind of dive into some of those early growth stories that you had. So if you could tell me, what was the first thing that LFLY was doing when you founded the company?
Yeah. Really where it started was this idea of, demystifying cannabis, giving people information around these different strains and providing a platform to share that information. At the time, organizations like Yelp were pretty popular. I mean, Yelp is obviously still very popular, but these were early days where it's kind of crowdsourced content, review content. How do you seed a platform like that when you have no users? It's the cold start problem, right? It's age old, right? You have a website, an app that has a number of strains, and we, plugged in the strains, ourselves originally. I think we had about 100, maybe 150 to start. That does sound like a lot. So maybe like 100. And, we would review them ourselves and kind of make up reviews with different usernames, which sounds ridiculous, but it's a strategy that's worked for you when you read about Reddit and other kind of properties where you kind of have to seed the system to kind of contribute that information. We didn't do a ton of that, and thankfully a lot of people started finding us and starting to contribute that data, but it really was kind of a way to solve the cold start problem there. And once you have those reviews in, then it kind of is self-fulfilling or a nice virtuous cycle, right? Where, people see a number of reviews, they'll sign up because they see the number of reviews and they'll start reviewing, and then that creates more reviews and then more attracts more people and so on. So that's probably the very beginning. And then from there, I think the next big source of growth, or where the growth all came from, was SEO. So really optimization for organic search. And, it sounds so obvious again today. It's hard to believe, how fast tech moves. But in 2010, this is still, I think, early days of SEO. And you could really tune things, quite effectively. In being in the cannabis vertical, talking about strains, there really wasn't a lot of good content. You'd find like maybe an article, about a specific strain from time to time, but we really had good breadth of strains. So we started to capture those search terms. So when people were searching Blue Dream, LFLY was moving up the rankings and eventually, captured that coveted number one spot. And, the website itself was very much specifically designed for a broad mainstream audience, not kind of the stereotype cannabis consumer at the time, the high times stereotype that was so prevalent back in 2010. I mean, it is very much more normalized, in a lot of ways since then. But at the time, it was pretty unprecedented and quite a unique approach. And I think that when people click through that link, they saw that kind of look and felt comfortable. We wanted to create a website that kind of spoke to us as, general consumers, just like, I like to enjoy wine or I enjoy beer, same thing from time to time. So that really helped. I think the organic search, and the more strains we'd input, the more search terms we'd capture, the more growth we'd get, the more users and so on. And then again, another virtuous cycle, and just continued to snowball. And then as states started legalizing, people started searching as dispensaries opened up. And it was just this natural tailwind that you just captured just from legalization. It's still happening today. I mean, we're in 2022. New Jersey is about to legalize adult use in a matter of weeks. You've got New York on the horizon, most likely this year, potentially next year when the stores start opening for adult use. So those things continue to help LFLY.
That is very exciting. Let's start with the cold start problem. Can you walk me through that aspect? Did you have competitors, or were you literally just the only one reviewing this?
There were, I guess, blogs, magazines that would maybe talk about strain reviews, but nothing really for user contribution. I guess you could maybe argue forums. There existed some forums at the time that may still be around where people would, share this kind of information, but it was very unstructured data compared to what we were doing. And so I think that for those that are struggling with the cold start problem, I mean, one, there's a lot of research, some good books, even lately that have been published on this, because it is, I think, a challenge for many kind of somewhat two-sided businesses here, where you're trying to bring different groups together. And so I think, do the research, read all the work that's been done out there, and then, just be mindful of it. What can you invest in, on your side? Like, how many strains did we need? How many reviews did we need for it to look and feel like there was enough content for our visitors that were coming through? I think that was, something that we were very mindful of. What strains were the most popular? So if I was Airbnb, they're probably looking at, where do people vacation most, or where are most hotel reservations happening? Let's start there, right? Start seeding that so you capture, that audience instead of maybe some random small town that doesn't have a lot of people going through. So I think just being mindful about, what kind of content you're producing, and what kind of audience you're attracting, and then, trying to do, maybe the bare minimum, because it's a fair amount of work, and you don't want to do too much of it. You want the natural. You just literally want to start the engine, or maybe not literally, but you really want to start it moving. And once it's going, then it's going. So, what is the minimum that it's going to take to get that engine going?
Absolutely. And I'm definitely clear on marketplaces that don't have enough. How much time did you spend getting there? Was it like a month, 2 months before you're like, okay, we're ready to release it to the world?
I think it was like a month. We were pretty eager and didn't want to spend too much time, especially, we were just launching this thing and, the MVP kind of version of it, and really didn't know if it was going to work or not. And, you want to be sensitive to how much time you invest in something. But yeah, I feel like it was like a month. It's been a long time, so I could be wrong, but we were pretty quick to get it out there into the world to see, is this something that the world wants, or was it just us? And I think now, it being publicly traded and the growth that it's had, it's pretty clear that it is something that resonates with a bigger audience than myself and my co-founders.
Absolutely. So when you first released those initial 100 reviews, you're like, hey, we're LFLY. We have reviews. We're like the Yelp for cannabis. What was that initial outreach? Did you go to partners in the industry and say, hey, can you send this out on your blog? Or did you just have some people in your network and you just sent emails?
We just sent kind of emails. We really focused on kind of tech blogs. I remember posting on things like Hacker News, and now there's all sorts of tools out there to kind of announce yourself. So we started there. We did reach out to some publications in the industry to kind of say, hey, we're here, we're covering, the cannabis space, and we're doing it a little bit differently. We'd love to, for you to talk about us. And there were some groups that did that. I think that we had a pretty unique take. So it was unique in the space. I mean, now there are a lot of ways to share kind of this information out there. But at the time there wasn't. And so I think a lot of people wanted to talk about us. And so that gave us some advantages. Plus, like kind of the mainstream approach, I think people did recognize that cannabis is something that will eventually be, federally legal in the U.S., maybe worldwide at some point, and on a state by state basis today. But felt like a little ahead of the curve there, and so it was just a topic people wanted to discuss, and maybe because it's a little bit of a taboo topic too, that kind of resonated at the time. So all those kind of factors seemed to work in our favor, and we just kind of were able to capture some of that opportunity. And, we certainly weren't the first website in cannabis, but, one of the first that really focused on it in the way we did, which is something for everybody, that is not that stereotype.
So the next thing you talked about was SEO. It sounds like that was maybe a couple years in. Could you tell me like how you selected that channel, or was it just obvious because that's where most of the leads were coming from?
Yeah, it was kind of obvious, I guess. We weren't, kind of knowing what I know now, we weren't very rigorous around like testing channels. I think now I'm much smarter at this after, more than 10 years doing it. But I think the right approach is to, test channels and find the one that might get some traction and then invest there, significantly. And maybe, there's one or two or three, or however many are start proving out. But, search was something that, myself, my co-founders had some experience in. Search was something that was very top of mind at the time in 2010. And so it was just kind of we've got to optimize if we're going to be discovered, like we've got to be in the Google rankings. And then noticing that, we could capture those coveted top positions for a lot of search terms around the strains. And the more strains that there were, just the more search that we could start to capture. So I think it was maybe better to be lucky than smart sometimes, right? So we were kind of lucky stumbling into search and just, okay, this is a great channel for us. And then really investing in it, staying on top of, best practices with Google, really, diving into the resources that were available at the time on, how to do it appropriately. That's something also that, it's kind of part of our ethos is like always do it right. And, no tricks. Like tricks are never, I mean, they may work quickly, but, you want to invest in the fundamentals. And so that long-term you can really, capture and maintain your place. At the time, I remember there were a lot of tricks people were trying and stuff that were, kind of sketchy, like hiding text and stuff. And we just avoided all of that. And the sites that were doing that at the time all got penalized, with the algorithm updates, and Google would change things and then people would lose rankings. And that was one thing that we never had to worry about, right? Because we're always doing it according to like what they suggested. And, maybe we didn't have to do tricks because we had some traction and, what was working. But I think that's the right approach is just, try to follow the rules as best you can and, push them if you can, but definitely, don't the hacking stuff, like the hacky stuff, I should say, that people are doing. I just remember, other companies and stuff, when algorithm updates would come out, they would lose their rankings and then there goes your revenue and the whole thing is tough. So, that was kind of our approach. So kind of lucked into it, really focused on it, spent a lot of time making sure we're doing it right. And paid dividends.
That's so hard to do because there's such a temptation in the early days to just hack everything. But the more that I talk to founders, I've talked to a lot of cool founders like yourself, like the founder of ZoomInfo, the founder of Outreach, .io, Doxin, and a bunch of other ones. And it's all just the ones who just keep their heads down. They don't they're not chasing shiny things. They're working on the things they know that's going to make a difference. It doesn't happen overnight. And they keep their head down and they keep moving. And that's what I'm hearing with you. Like we just did it the right way. We kept our head down with SEO. We saw it. It was working it wasn't rocket science. It was more about, we had something that was valuable. So let's just continue in that motion.
That's exactly right. And it takes sometimes more time, but I think longer term, you're in a better spot because of it.
Absolutely. Well, the final question is around expansion opportunities. Was there any expansion strategy like within the people who are already coming to the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, we launched an app, I guess, as the first, the big change. It was web-based, and again, funny to remember, but in 2010, I think the iPhone was introduced in 2010. I don't even know if it was in market, maybe at the tail end of the year. But when the iPhone came out, there was no app store. Apps were, these simple things on the Java frameworks on your Motorola's, for any listeners who remember those days. But the App Store came along finally. I don't know, maybe 2012, maybe 2011. I don't remember when it landed. And we got the app in there, and that was not easy either. I mean, we're a cannabis company. Apple was very much a controlling entity, and I think still is in a lot of ways. Hence, no Fortnite on the App Store. But we were able to come in and capture reviews. Given Apple is based in California, cannabis is legal in California, they were okay with that. They've broadened a lot now. You can actually purchase in legal markets through apps, which is a huge, I think, a progressive step that they've taken. But again, it's like memory lane here. But it's funny to think about. That was a whole new channel. Web was it. And yeah, sure, apps might have existed in simple ways on Nokias, but not at the level that they were being designed for phones, and not certainly in the world that we're in today, where when you go to a Yelp, I feel like they just push you to get the app. Like, don't even use our website. We want you to have the app. And so that's definitely contributed to the growth as kind of the next big evolution. So I guess you could chalk it up to new channel, right? New channel for consumer adoption. And it's worked wonders.
Did you jump right on it, or were you more of the cautious type? Like, hey, we don't want to just chase another shiny thing.
We just did it. I had an iPhone. I bought an iPhone day one. I used to be in mobile, doing like mobile games, way back, and so I just dabbling, and really wanted to build an app. And so I was like, let's do this. We had some challenges with the app review process. We had to change some things about Leafly to be able to get in. We had to focus a bit more on the medical side, kind of adding like a negatives component of consuming. We didn't have that. We had some more recreational or adult use kind of stuff, but they weren't cool with that. So we changed it. So actually kind of changed some of the trajectory of Leafly for the better, I think, too. So yeah, we definitely jumped in, worked with the App Store or the review teams to finally get it through. And I think at the time it was proving to be pretty successful. iPhones. If you remember, like BlackBerries and stuff, and just the transition, the speed of adoption, how revolutionary it was. So it felt less like a fad, more like, okay, this is something that's probably gonna be here for a while. Let's start building. And iPhone was first, and then Android came second.
Really appreciate your time. It's just really cool to see what you built. And if you want to just tell us quickly about Headset, and then I will let you go.
Yeah, sure. So still working on the cannabis vertical. We're really focused on the data and analytics side of the business. You can imagine that there's all these markets now, all these products and brands and categories. So we basically make sense of that. We source our data directly from dispensaries and retailers. We normalize it, and we get that information out to operators. So the people that are producing these brands that want to understand the competitive landscape, maybe find opportunity for new product introductions, understand who the consumer is and how to target the consumer. And then the kind of non-endemic customer base, like financial services companies or consumer packaged goods companies that are making investments in this category, trying to understand, what is this? Where do I apply my resources? How do I produce a product in this market? How do I invest in this market, and so on? And so we do that with Headset. And like any company, have growth stories there as well. It's quite different, but for us, it's sourcing retail data. And so we've built a lot of kind of network effects, getting like our customers to be advocates for our data sources where they're talking to retailers about how they should use a headset. And then the retailers call us and say we need to plug in a headset, and becomes another data source. And so there's all sorts of cool ways that you can grow, and it's more on the B2B side where Leafly is more B2C. But it's been a great ride, and this industry is ever changing, always fascinating. Even 10 plus years in, and looking forward to the next handful of years and where it goes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. This is incredible.
Thanks, Adam.
That's a wrap. Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and Google. If you want to learn more about Zendesk for Startups and our free offer, please check out our website at zendesk.com/startups.